Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to AMJ Radio Live on Spaces, a weekly conversation hosted on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, at your very own at AOM Connect. Tune in to AMJ Radio Live every week on Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. To do so, look out for the link posted at AOM Connect, or click on the profile picture of the host you see here when they are outlined in a bright color. That means that they are live or on air. This series has a scholar-on-scholar approach where different members of the AOM research community have the chance to speak to and learn from leading authorities in the broad field of management research. The first Wednesday of every month, we invite a special guest to give their remarks on our theme for the month. We recently had guests like Joanna Meyer speaking about Grand Challenges Research Today, as well as John Joseph speaking about decision-making research today. Look out for the link in our bio for the full list and past recordings of our many, many distinguished guests. The second Wednesday of every month, we hear a teaser of The Lit Review, an incredible podcast diving deep into a recent AMJ paper hosted by Sekou Burmese. The fourth Wednesday of every month features an actual AMJ editor. We get to find out a fun fact about this editor, their expertise, what it's been like serving as an editor at the Academy of Management Journal. And I haven't forgotten the third Wednesday of every month. The third Wednesday of every month is interactive and open to being shaped by you. Look for the form in our bio to submit your ideas for guests, to nominate yourself, to suggest formats for this weekly conversation. It's just past 11 now, so let's open up the conversation. I am Dr. Netra Pan. I'm a lecturer in entrepreneurship at Bayes Business School, formerly known as CAS. And I am joined by none other than Professor Giuseppe Soda. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Such a pleasure to be with all you. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Professor Soda is a professor of organization theory and network analysis at Bocconi University. He has been the dean of SDA Bocconi School of Management and held also other leadership positions at Bocconi. Today, he serves international institutions such as EFMD, the European Foundation for Management Development, as a member of the EQUIS Accreditation Board and Graduate Management Admissions Council as member of the Board of Directors. Professor Soda's research focuses on social, intra- and inter-organizational network origins and dynamics, and on the performance consequences of the interplay between organizational formal architectures and organizational networks. So he's the perfect person to launch December, our theme for this month being social networks, and he's a perfect person to give us a download on social networks research today. So over to you, Professor. How are you and where are you?
Again, thank you so much. I'm fine. I'm in Germany, actually. I'm enjoying my sabbatical leave. Exactly, I'm now visiting Huot Bensheim School of Management, giving a talk, and I'm glad to be with you all.
So let's dive into the first question on social networks. How would you qualify this term?
So the idea of social and organizational network is, I have to say, foundational in organization and management theory. Since the origin in the last century, it was clear that many of the actual existing partners of human interaction within organizations have no representation in the formal organization. And I have to say are typically inadequately represented by the formal organization. And it is a truism, I have to say, that the organization of a company do not correspond to a blueprint plan or the organizational chart. So the informal organization has important functional qualities, right? So, and this is the way in which we typically define social intra-organizational networks. And they, as I said, they have functional qualities by easing communication or facilitating trust, or establishing flows of knowledge, but also granting authority, establishing work routines that are difficult to dictate through the formal structure. So essentially, this is the way in which we define social structures by looking at the networks of interactions that take place within organization, not just following the rules and the organization chart and the formal organization, but enacted by individuals and organizational actors.
Okay, wow. Yeah, it's true. That's a really comprehensive way of seeing all of the social interactions that make up our organizational life. Indeed, not comprised only of the formal organization and all the formal rules surrounding that. Would you say then that anything that is not formally dictated by the formal organization then de facto becomes part of the informal social structure?
I mean, we can use this pair of lenses. Obviously, my research, what I did in a couple of papers, by the way, one published in the Academic Management Journal precisely, was exactly to conceive also the formal as a network of interactions. And this obviously has also a kind of methodological innovation by translating the formal organization into networks of interactions. And then by using this unified framework as organization, as the complex landscape of formally designed and informally emerged interactions, you can also compare them and assess their consistency. So, but obviously there are other sides, if you like, when we talk about informal. Think about culture within organizations and values and other kind of behavioral aspects, if you like, that cannot necessarily be understood as a network of interactions. But this is in my research I have operationalized and look at informal and formal too, as a network of interactions among individuals.
Okay, so really seeing social networks as the network of interactions among individuals, interchangeably with the informal social structure upon which a formal organization can be built or not.
Exactly. Or if you want, I mean, when we talk about formal, we typically think about the normative systems designed by management or blueprint of behaviors established by rules or procedures and structures for coordinating and control. Formal is the emergent patterns of individual behaviors and interactions among individuals. But as I said, as well as norms, values, and beliefs that underlie such behaviors and interactions. So, and by looking at this, by conceptualizing formal and informal with this pair of lenses, allows researchers to look at that interplay and see how this interplay affects behaviors, outcomes, whatever.
Fascinating. So, before I move on to the next question, would you say that these lenses and looking at this interplay is essentially going to be an evergreen research topic going forward?
Oh, naturally. This is a very interesting question. I'm not sure that I could define as an evergreen research topics because, as I said, this idea is foundational to organization and management research since really the beginning. But let me say, some questions, or if you want, many questions are still unanswered, despite these foundational roots. And I think this is because we are missing an integrating theory that enhances understanding of the interplay between formal and informal social structures and their effects on organizational functioning and performance. If you want, I can give you some example of still open questions. For instance, what are the mechanisms by which formal organizational structure influence the emergence of informal networks? What drives individuals to form connections and engage in exchanges beyond the rules and prescriptions of the organization? Are those informal connections always patched around the scaffolding of the formal arrangements? Or if you want, put differently, to what extent the formation of informal social structures is exogenous or endogenous to the patterns of interactions and constraints defined by the formal structures? Or again, what explains divergence or convergence between formal and informal behavioral patterns? Would be beneficial that formal and informal were more aligned, or is the divergence advantageous as it is? I mean, these are just examples of questions that still unanswered. So in terms of, I don't know whether evergreen or not, but we need to research on these areas because we still need some answers.
Well, I love this teaser of what you would like to see next. Let's come back to that towards the end of the conversation. I would like to draw your attention to actually, it's not so recent now, in 2014, from the Academy of Management Annals. You wrote an article more formally, rediscovering the missing link between formal organization and informal social structure with Bill McEvely and Marco Tortoriello. Shout out also to Marco. Thank you for the introduction and allowing us to have you here. What were your most surprising findings of this deep dive onto the history and scholarship on informal social structure?
Wow, this is another not easy question. So the most surprising finding, given that we're talking about something that is really foundational, and as I said, let me limit the findings to formal informal. So that's there is a consolidating, a shared understanding, let me say this, the formal social structure within and outside organizations impact a variety of organizational outcomes, right? We know this. I don't know whether surprising or not, we know that this impacts growth, productivity, advancement and promotions, generation of innovation, creativity, performance, and many others kind of outcomes. At the same time, I have to say, and this is, if you want, surprising a little bit, organizational behaviors and outcomes has emerged as a complex function of the interactions among organizational actors, which are substantially shaped by both formal and informal social structures and their interplay. So this is the surprising story. By taking an interaction network perspective on both formal and informal, the concept, the idea of organizational change into a complex landscape of multiple networks linking individual or organizational actors, broadly speaking, either formally designed or informally emergent, that direct, constrain, and induce behavior and ultimately shape organizational functioning. So this is interesting because we found, and this is a little surprising, given that this literature, despite, as I said, the foundational role, had been evolving essentially independently, like, and we say, two ships in the night. In some, the more researchers, as well as practitioners, I have to say, attempt to disentangle formal organization and informal social structures to understand their unique effects, the less we learn about how they actually operate. So this is surprising. That's the reason why we need more research on this.
That is surprising indeed. I wonder if I can share a popular example of when the Pixar offices were built. So apparently the mailboxes were all placed in a central place, particularly to enable informal social interactions to emerge. So by everyone checking their mail, it allowed people to basically interact across hierarchies and so forth, and potentially create ideas. So we see that there's an obvious relationship between the formal organization and the informal social interactions. But as you say, it's surprising that they're rarely taken together as a whole. What do you think of this example, and why do you think it is that they're not taken as a whole?
Yeah, very, very, very appropriate. Yeah, exactly. This is a very, very good example of what I meant with this complex interplaying, and the fact that we need now models and research understanding, the conditions under which this interplay influence performances, outcomes. And in the article you mentioned on Academy and Management Annals with Bill McEvely and Marco Tortoriello, we tried also to develop a taxonomy of the possible interactions effects that could be, formal and informal may interplay in different ways. They can be substitutes, they can be complement, they can also, collide to each other. We need to understand precisely under which conditions they interplay, makes influence and why and which kind of influence. Yeah. So I think the example was really appropriate. Yeah.
Right, I do see that on page 314,
Yeah.
four perspectives that have been taken.
Yeah.
So given the challenge of really studying the interplay and really taking both elements into account, how would you see yourself as a researcher? How would you classify yourself, either from themes, interests, and goals? And I also want to ask a related question, because there's a tendency in the management research domain to also define ourselves as micro or macro. How do you see yourself?
So Karl Popper, let me use Karl Popper. So Karl Popper, talking about social scientists and in general scientists, was saying, we are not members of disciplines. We are students of problems. So even though obviously my identity is I'm organization theorist and organization management, if you want, scholar, I have to say I'm more interested to problems than to show my identity as, part of a group, right? Or a discipline. So since my PhD, I was interested in this also intellectually and this interplay between, the rules. We always leave, following rules and meeting people because we have to meet, because we accepted to be part of organizations which we have formal rules and formal structures and formal roles. But at the same time, this is truism. We also develop our own understanding of the organization functioning, and we develop our own relationship. So I was, since my PhD, interested to this interplay between rules and structure and emerging behaviors. And also taking a dynamic perspective by looking at, the origins and dynamic evolution of this interplay. So I see my identity as a researcher essentially with try to address the questions coming from the problem I see rather than as part of a discipline or a group, and try to combine curiosity, intellectual curiosity, with rigor in my methods, and also by trying, this was an attempt, I don't know if I succeed or not on this, but try to also don't lose the relevance of what we do in terms of, contributing to understanding of, our society, in my case, organizations. So combining relevance and rigor with curiosity, that was essentially the way in which I've interpreted ontologically my role as a researcher.
I love this, and I'm so glad it's being recorded. I think that this is so full of insights, and folks will really appreciate the chance to go back and listen to what you've said. So I won't actually ask you what you would like to see in terms of your field, because you did point us to your paper and you have given some really excellent research questions. But just in the interest of helping those who might feel a little bit overwhelmed, because there are it seems like there's such a blue ocean there of exciting things to look at. Maybe where would you recommend new scholars to start, or maybe older scholars to start, of things you'd like to see in the field?
I know, and I see by looking at first my PhD students or young assistant professors that obviously, academic career needs showing that, we have a voice. So, being published is a way to do this. And I see that sometimes we're missing the big questions, the big picture, and prefer to go into very specific stuff because it's easier to get published on this. It's much more difficult to address big problems than small issues. I understand this, but at the same time, I would like to see more questions coming from real problems. I would like to see more ends and purpose of research and less stress, if you want, on specification strategies. Sometimes I got the impression that means are becoming the ends. And that's not what that maybe because I'm old, but that's not what we want for the future. So I would like to see more multi-methods, more multi-studies, more intellectual pluralism, and if you want, more impact. I know it's not easy, but that's what I would like to see.
Thank you so much. So this has been more philosophical than I expected, from Karl Popper to a Kantian discussion on the means and ends. Thank you so much for this inspiring conversation. And I really hope that this sparks inspiration and insights for our listeners. Thanks so much, Pepe.
It's my pleasure, Netra. And thank you so much to all the people listening.
Thank you. Bye.